the Grey Hat Beard podcast. Hello and welcome to part 2 of Grey Hat Beard. If you're here for the news, you're in the wrong part. That was in part 1, because in part 2, we're going to be looking back at the biggest things that happened this year. Well, we might skip a few because they've been talked about a lot, so we'll try and stick slightly in the modern workplace world. Now, the way we're going to run this, for anyone who might have seen us at ComsFirst or Collab Days, Munich and Vienna, we're going to run this with a series of rounds. So there's actually going to be timings against this, and we're not going to overtalk. So I'm going to, hopefully. So we'll all get a chance to speak and say what we think about each of the questions, and then we'll have a couple of minutes at the end of each round just to chat about what we think and anything we might have missed. But we're going to get straight into it. For those watching the video, you will see we do have a nice fancy PowerPoint that is up and running on there. And we have our panelists. So if you haven't listened to part 1, we've got the 3 of us. So Gary, Al and myself. We do have Gary now for part 2. He has appeared. But we're also joined by Laura GB and Michal, I'm going to get your name wrong again, Pisarek. Is that right? Have I got that right this time?
That's very good. No, that's very good. Very good.
Sorry, I got it completely wrong the first time. So we'll get cracking into this with question number 1. So question 1 is, without mentioning COVID, Trump, Brexit or climate change, what was the biggest news this year? And first up, we have our very own Mr. Al Erdley.
Is the timer running?
The timer should be running. Yeah, it is crashing down.
Okay. So I think for me, it's CDS, Dataverse, Oakdale, whatever we want to call all of these things these days. But it is, as the Dataverse is emerging from that dynamic sort of heartland where it's grown up and becoming a little more common amongst the SharePoint folks who are moving from SharePoint into the Power Platform. And it's really starting to take off with Dataverse for Teams, with all of these different ways that we can actually use this data to build Canvas apps, moving away from those horrible relational models that we used to build in SharePoint, because we all know it's not a relational database, and actually then starting to use, the tools that are actually designed for that purpose. So for me, I think over the year, it's been a massive change. A lot of people are starting to pick up on Dataverse, understand what it is, what it can do. And I think it's about time we had a proper platform to build within Office 365 that has forms, it has automation, and it has a really good data storage, all in one place. And obviously it can all be serviced in Teams, which, as you will have heard in the news, that's where everything has to be.
Absolutely. Now, a few of you may be hearing some dings, and I forgot to say at the beginning that we actually track some points. So every time Al makes a good point, he gets a ding. And if he makes a really good point, you may have heard a little hallelujah there, so he gets some more points of that. I'm not going to share the points, but the top 2 at the end will get to go round to a round of Defend the Indefensible. So let's see who's up next. Is Laura. Over to you.
Okay, so for 2020, the biggest change. So I'm coming from the Power BI side. So Power BI arrived in Teams properly, rather than just reports being put across the tabs. You can get to your Power BI there. And then also, if you go to the Power BI, in the Power BI service, they've also put in the diagram views of which your data set, what are its data sources and which data sets go to which data sets, so people can see it. Okay, and then for me, the most exciting news of 2020 was they bought premium per user. So lots of features like paginated reports, and hey, paginated bear was happy. And if anybody doesn't know who the paginated bear is, go find it. It's your homework. And which means I can give you we can now use features, AI features, machine learning features, decent data flow merging and things are all there. And the other brilliant feature was I've still got 30 seconds. Is the in data flows, you've got this brilliant diagram views of how your queries are built up and they're really pretty. And if you write your functions in a certain way, they make really pretty diagrams. So hey, that kept me happy.
Fantastic. I should say, if you don't want to use all 90 seconds, there's nothing wrong with cutting off a little bit early. So don't worry too much about that. Right. Next up, we have Michael. What was the biggest news for you this year?
So I've got a few. So I think the first thing for me is just the growth of digital transformation and how quickly organizations moved to the cloud when COVID happened. Lots of experiences with companies that have been trying to move to M365 for years, and all of a sudden, they move for it. They move to it in about a week or a few days. The other thing as well for me, from just a usage perspective, I think just the growth of intelligent meeting solutions, particularly on Teams, and how much investment was made through Microsoft and Zoom and everyone else in terms of creating really rich meeting experiences. It might have not been used, but it's something that I think has impacted people's lives so much that it becomes pretty apparent. A couple of other things maybe outside a little bit of Microsoft. I think the Slack acquisition by Salesforce is really going to be interesting, and seeing how Microsoft is going to respond to that. I think that's nothing but good news in terms of pushing everything forward, especially with how dominant Microsoft is. So I really like that. And then the other thing as well is from a hardware perspective, the Apple M1 chip. Just the kind of huge gains that they seem to make in the PC space. Now, I'm not an Apple user, but reading some of the reviews and seeing some of the stuff that's going on, it really looks like they've made a bit of a quantum leap in terms of computer hardware. And once again, super interesting to see how some of the other vendors respond to that also.
And I do apologise, you lost a point there for mentioning Apple. I mean, very valid thing to bring up. This is a Microsoft podcast, and no, I think it's a very, very interesting one about the M1 chip, but we'll cover that when we get to the end. Next up, I think we have Gary.
Right. Okay. So I think Teams related definitely is the reimagining of SharePoint. Is kind of the big news for this year. I think SharePoint coming back with the home app, bringing the internet into Teams, having a much more of a intuitive experience rather than just, we've just thrown a SharePoint page in a tab. It's now becoming part of the platform, which is good. And you could also say that kind of was shown with Microsoft Lists. Definitely not SharePoint Lists rebranded. Definitely not that at all. But it's that way that you're in Teams but using SharePoint Lists. It's that technology that but it's got that little bit more of a polish and end user focus. So I think that's one of the big things that I think probably maybe people didn't expect. SharePoint's been around but always in the background. It was now kind of seen as, well, we're never going to see it again, but actually it's come back to the fore. On that as well, I think that's helped with SharePoint Framework as well. So we're going to see, I think we've seen a lot of SharePoint Framework coming into Teams as well. Like Al alluded to, you've got Dataverse for Teams, you've got all those app kind of ecosystems. You've now got SharePoint Framework taking more of a presence in Teams for extensibility. So I think SharePoint coming back was big news for me.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I have another point for that one. It's one problem. I'm kind of scribbling notes at the same time so we can talk about what things we're going to talk about when we're all back together, and then forgetting to give people points as well. So, in a first for this format, it's now going to be my chance to speak, and I think Al, are you ready to assault me?
I will get my revenge. Sorry, give you points where you deserve them.
Absolutely. So, for the first time, I get the pressure of going down for 90 seconds. So, Kevin, over to you. Oh, I can't talk about myself in third person. That's weird. So, let's go. What do I think is the biggest news this year? And I think there's been lots of news this year. There's been, as Michael said, going that transformation that people do. But the biggest news for me is the start of the death of IE11. IE11, that mainstay of so many organizations that still have it there, that are still using it, even though so many things have stopped working on it, is finally going to go. They have taken it out of Teams to the point where it even hit the Daily Express here. They thought it was that important that Microsoft was killing it off for millions of users, they said. The reality was no one would have been using IE11 for Teams anyway, but let them have that joy. But finally it's going for Office 365, and developers no longer have to worry about it so much. They can actually create fantastic solutions without having to backfill all the things that kind of work but don't really and hamper everything else. So I am so happy that we can finally get rid of this and not worry about it. Other big one, little bit of a disappointment, this one, but big news is, if I go back to our first episode of Grey Hat Beard, we talked about Cortex and Project Cortex and how amazing it was going to be. And we've got to the end of year almost, and not all of it has been released yet. So I think we've had Syntax. What has come out is absolutely brilliant. Really like it, but I'm a little bit sad to know that not everything has landed yet. So I would like to see more Cortex, please. Ooh, that's quite hard, isn't it? So we've now got 2.5 minutes and we get to have a natter between ourselves. What did everyone think of everyone else's? Any points they wanted to add?
I quite liked, Michael, you were coming out with the non-Microsoft things. So, the Slack acquisition, that's pretty recent. That is big. That is huge for the, just modern workplace, right? It's the two biggest rivals, potentially going head to head. We don't know. Let's see what happens. But we know that Slack has got a big backing now. So it'd be interesting to see where they go.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see where Salesforce, if Salesforce tries to move into the collaboration market, whether they try to develop something new, or maybe they try to do another acquisition. So something like Box could be one of their targets as well. But I think any competition is good competition. And yeah, it'll be pretty fascinating to see what happens in the next few months or years, and how both companies.
It's whether they decide to try and integrate it and make it part of Salesforce, or they just almost a bit like GitHub and Microsoft, where they've just kept it going and sort of invested in it, made it break a few more times, but whether they just leave it as its own entity instead. Be interesting to see that.
It'll also be interesting to see whether they go through the same thing that Microsoft has gone through as it's developed SharePoint, and always having these slightly different technologies that you kind of, is it WebDAV? What are we doing for uploading files? It's see whether they do it more smoothly. I think it was interesting what you said. Yeah, what you said, Gary, around the SharePoint framework and how that's kind of come into the fore. I think the other thing was security. It seems to be everywhere now. Whether it's in Teams, whether it's in Power BI, security is so prominent now across the whole of the modern workplace as well. None of us really mentioned that, but
I think that's been a big thing as well with the kind of move, that mass digitalization and transformation that Michael talked about. Security has got pulled along with that as well, because more people are working from home. Those boundaries have changed, and people are taking security a lot more seriously. Whereas before they could just put big walls up. Now far less so.
And people are more aware of sharing data, the issues of private data in the past couple of years.
Yes, having done a GDPR assessment this morning as part of our internal stuff, it's all fun. We still have all of that stuff there, but it is more prominent.
Ouch. Right, so we better move on, and seeing as we have timers, we should make some use of them. So let's go on to question number 2. What do you expect to see in the world of modern workplace for 2021? So we looked back, we said all the big news there. How much of that do we see carrying forward? And of course, we are videoing this. We are recording on the podcast. We do get to see what we all said when we come to this time next year. So no pressure. First up, Mr. Gary Trinder.
So this is an interesting one, because I was going to go with a technology kind of answer, but actually it's not. I think it's we've been living through this forced working from home. Everyone's trying to learn how to work from home. And I think have taken that kind of how I work in the office and to home. And I think, you know, we always hear about it, people in lots of meetings, we've talked about it a lot on the show as well, is that I think that there's going to be a time when people are going to start to look at the way that they are working and start to adjust their work patterns a bit more, because I don't think it can really continue at how it's going at the moment. I don't think people can't stay all day in meetings. It's just not good for everyone. I think there has to be an appreciation that there is a different way of working. That might mean that you start to see more of this kind of like asynchronous working. You know, not always assuming that people are around, and I think that really for me is what I hope, expect. I really hope that we see that, because, you know, I think people who have been working from home have then really struggled with this as well, with having to, you know, deal with almost a whole company that is not used to working from home, and having to go through the, you know, the pain that we've all kind of been through and an adjustment through our work.
Well, Gary, I'm afraid you're going to lose a point because that's outrageous that you've gone for a really sensible topic instead of talking about dev stuff, just to really confuse us. But yeah, some really good points there. Al, what are you expecting to see in 2021?
So I'm expecting to see more around the productivity, the workplace analytics, the way the data is being used to actually improve the way we work. And I think, you know, it plays into a bit of what Gary said, but I think, you know, the way we've had social media being able to use algorithms around all of the data that we've got. Microsoft is one of the few companies that has a volume of data where they can make unique observations about how we actually work and what we actually do, and therefore they should be able to actually, you know, improve things accordingly. I do hope they will share the data with, you know, educational institutions and make sure that, you know, it's not just proprietary, but I think we will be able to see a lot more around, you know, what works, what doesn't work, you know, the way our minds work now in this day and age of, you know, all of these distractions. You know, can we actually see mentally how our brains work better when we're working in an engaged format, in a focused way, as opposed to being distracted? And if we can start to measure the impact of some of the technical things that, you know, iPhones, any smartphone, all of the distractions of Twitter and social media, if we can start to actually get more insight into those, then I think as a society we'll probably be a lot better off.
Absolutely, really. Oh, there's too many good points here. I love the way that you were talking about distractions as I clicked on the ding as well, just to try and distract you.
See, I've got my focus head is on, yeah.
Okay, next up, having had talking about workplace analytics and data there, next up we have Laura. What do you think is going to happen in 2021 in the modern workplace?
One of the things that I think has happened, given the without mentioning too many of them, but given the things that have happened in 2020, elections and data that's being produced, I think people have become more aware of how data works. So I think people expect to be able to see it. So I think I would love to see the stats of how many people have been accessing the Financial Times reporting on the COVID stats. And it's the guy who actually writes those reports does a stunning job on Twitter about various things. And it's really interesting to see how there are my 80-year-old father-in-law has been and looked at the stats. So if he's doing it, I'm assuming the rest of the world are as well. And so that brings in an expectation of what they expect in the workplace, what they expect to be able to see in there. Well, can you plot it? And there've been some really interesting stats across America about the ways of doing bad mapping, whether it's blue or red. And there are some fantastic graphics out there to show you there. So I think 2021, I'm expecting people to expect more out of data reporting. And Microsoft and Salesforce and Tableau to step up and meet the mark.
Very good point. I know we talked on the show with Clarissa Gillingham about telling stories, and we were talking about the charts they showed at some of the Prime Minister's briefing and quite how poor they were, and the fact that so many people commented on them was good. But I'm not meant to be chatting between here, so I will stop. I've got to remind myself what on earth I was going to say, because next up is me. Are you all ready, Al?
I am ready.
Fantastic. So what do I expect to see in 2021? Gary and Al, I'm going to disappoint you. It's not about bots. Exactly. It's not more bots. It's not seeing them take over the world. But actually, it's related. It's AI. If you see the notes, Al, it's not you. It is AI. It's not an L in the second bit. But I think we're going to see more and more. And I think we've seen this happen and creep up gradually over the years with things like the graph, where you're pulling all this data and making things from it. And we look at Microsoft Search, and it's using that artificial intelligence to kind of suggest things to you that it thinks it likes, rather than just saying, I'm looking for something, I want to go and get it. It's kind of preempting what you get. And I think we'll see that powering more and more. You'll be recommended on how to do things. And we've talked about etiquette, how you can look at what people are doing. And you probably won't even notice it. I think if we look back about 2 years, everyone was really, really worried about how I can't even say it, AI was going to take away people's jobs, because AI can speak properly, unlike me. But what we're seeing now is it's behind the scenes. It's powering a lot of things, but it's not talked about as being AI. We're not having to share that stuff. It is just happening. Things are getting more productive. Things are getting easier. People are seeing the benefits. My wife, who is really scared about the idea of robots taking over, admitted the other day that these things work better. Things like Google, Amazon, that work better with AI. And I think that's going to be the big trend that people aren't going to talk about much, hopefully. And that's it from me. God, I don't like this at all. I definitely want to stick to being host from this one. Last but by no means least, Michael, what do you see for 2021 apart from a fantastic company called Orchestry taking over the world?
Well, I hope so. So lots of things. So I think in the broader digital workplace vendor space, I think there's going to be a lot of consolidation. So not just in Microsoft 365, but I think you'll find a lot of these smaller tools are either going to get gobbled up by larger companies, or there's actually going to be a lot of new entrants into this space, right? With the new way of working, I think there's a lot of interesting opportunities there. The next thing I see is just around, I think Gary mentioned this, around how people work. And people are going to start going back to the office, but I don't think it's going to be as it used to be. I think there's going to be the concept of kind of a virtual office solution. Hybrid work is going to be a big thing. And I wonder if people just aren't going to be working from an office for 5 days like we used to. The third thing is I actually foresee, I mean, this is going to be controversial, email starting to die. I think this is an opportunity where you can make a huge amount of change. I think that organizations are starting to realize that maybe email is not the best tool to use for all of this stuff, especially when you're hybrid. I also think there's going to be a lot of organizations trying to manage knowledge a little bit better. So a big push for kind of KM solutions. But finally, I see next year, 21 and 22, challenges for organizations now with governance and content growth in M365. I think the challenges they have at the moment is getting the content in there in terms of provisioning. Next year, I think they're going to be talking about governance, content growth, and everything else. One more thing, 500 more names from Microsoft for common things as well.
Absolutely. I like the way that Michael's actually gone for the tactic of not just picking one topic, but picking a whole load, which is absolutely the right thing to have done on there, and getting far more hallelujahs by being rude about email and talking about knowledge management. He's obviously knows how to tick my buttons nicely.
I'm just trying to do a shotgun approach and seeing what lands, right?
You threw the big one in there, the getting rid of email. Like, how many years have we gone with that? Yeah. I don't
believe it, but
no, yeah, maybe.
Well, I think it's the only time. I mean, it's the only time I think in the last 20 years where I think people or organizations are now willing to change. You know how hard it's been. I mean, you guys are all consultants, right? And everyone's been in that space, trying to convince people that this is not the best way of working, right? That attaching a document to an email, it's probably not the best thing, and having underscore final underscore version 4 underscore final underscore, that type of stuff is probably not the best way.
But that's worked for 30 years. I think you're absolutely right, and I think it's also the newer generations coming through. We're starting to see, graduates come through from university where they've been working with teams. It's second nature to them to actually be messaging, not emailing. So, I think that's the other factor that will really start to kick in, is as we actually see, the generations who have grown up with this stuff, and in their formative years at university and school, they're using this stuff rather than using email.
I think the only counter I see to that, I think in large organizations within the organization, yes, and we see it. People use chats, they use Teams. That's the conversation. When you come outside that, less and less so, because you're starting to get different people using different systems. Michael, you've talked about Slack. Other people are going to be using Teams. Other people use Salesforce and Chatter. Because there's those different ones, email becomes the de facto place to go to for those external conversations at the moment, and because there's not a kind of single way of doing that. So what I think
I disagree.
Is email become more like chat, that you can now like an email in Outlook and things. But yeah, sorry, Laura.
No, I think email is slowing down. Having watched my two kids, they hate the idea of sending an email, but they'll send a WhatsApp message. They'll do that formally between lecturers and them, so they expect that in the workplace.
This is an interesting one though, because I can see both sides here, because it's one, Al, you've alluded to it, new workforce coming in, WhatsApp and everything, it's second nature. We also know the dangers of using those platforms from a focus point of view. If you're sending WhatsApp messages all day, when can you focus to do your work? So it's great power comes great responsibility. It is kind of that thing, isn't it? Yes, I can send that message to someone directly, but am I going to, throw them off their focus when they're getting work done? If everyone does that and everyone sends a message to someone every 20 minutes when they're busy trying to get some work done, they're not going to get that work done. That's the challenge of the modern workplace. I think it's that's part of the education, isn't it?
You can move from WhatsApp to messaging in Teams easier than you can move from WhatsApp to writing emails.
Yeah, I think that's the key. It's the format is different, the mechanism is different, but there is that transference that becomes easier and easier when people are used to it.
Especially for the next couple of years with all the students who've just done a year of remote study.
Yeah, absolutely. It's gonna radically change how they actually expect to interact.
It's interesting though. So on that point, sorry, Michael, I'll work on GitHub, and you could say that that's a Teams like communication. If I send a message to someone on GitHub, or put that on a thread, I don't expect an instant reply. It's going back to that asynchronous communication again. And I think that's it's the format, it's the expectation on the other side as well. It's lots of different factors that come into this. Sorry, Michael.
We need TikTok for business.
Oh God, no!
It needs to be TikTok for business. That platform, the engagement.
You were doing so well, Michael. I'm afraid I have to take a point off for that.
No. But the engagement on that platform is unbelievable. So, like I said, we need TikTok for business, and then Gary, you can do like quick 20-second dancing videos to communicate the status of your project.
I can do that Yammer, can't
I? I need like an anti-hallelujah that takes off 5 points. I'm just thinking of so many people in the office having to do little dances. No. Anyway, right, we better rock it and move on quickly from that one on to question number 3, and our last question as well. So we're coming into 2021. We've said what we think will happen, but lots of people listening to this, so they probably want a bit of advice. So what is your suggestion for our lovely listeners for 2021? Michael, you're up first.
Oh, right. Okay. So a few things. So, first of all, I think start planning for this to continue, because I think this whole way of working and everything else is going to be the same. The other thing, I mentioned this earlier, I think if you're in a digital workplace role within an organization, this is the time that you can actually do a lot of and instill a lot of change within an organization. I think organizations are super open now to new ways of working, leveraging all of these tools. I think it's super exciting for people who are in consulting roles, digital transformation roles, corporate comms professionals. I think it's going to open up a whole new way of working to them. From Microsoft 365, if you've just gotten onto the Microsoft 365 platform, even in 2021, just learn about the tools that Microsoft 365 provides and find out how much you have there out of the box. There's so much there. There's so many things that you can do. No one knows everything, so I think you can leverage all of those tools. From an organizational perspective, I think if you're working, like I said, within an organization or organizational leaders, you have to understand that you need to train your users to have these digital skills. That's a really important piece. I think the whole change management part of 365 is going to happen. And then just from a personal perspective, I think people need to really start to find balance in their lives. I think Gary mentioned it earlier. These days of back-to-back meetings and everything else, I think people really need to learn to, just get a bit more balance.
Yes, definitely. That would be nice. Thank you, Michael. Some really, really good points there. Right, next up is me. So, Al, are you all ready to heckle me down from over there?
Yeah, I'm ready to heckle you down. Go for it.
Right. So, what's my suggestion for our lovely listeners? This time last year, I was really getting into the final stages of thinking, I really want to do a podcast. I've been pondering it for a while, and I did it. It was my New Year's resolution, and we got there. I managed to convince Al and Gary somehow to come and join me on this crazy journey. So my suggestion is share. One, you could say, go for your dreams, stick to it, but actually it's share. Get out there, get blogging, join the community. If you're feeling confident, go and give a talk. It's not easy. I'm not going to downplay that, but go and talk about things you've done and share that, because you'll be surprised how many people do actually want to hear it. If you're not so confident, stick with a blog, share some things there, make it public, start going on Twitter. If you're working for a big organization, maybe start it there. Maybe you've got a blogging platform there, or you could start a newsletter and start sharing some ideas and tips around what you do. What I love about Microsoft 365 and what has stuck with me sticking in the SharePoint world for so much is that people can do their daily job and do it better and more productive with SharePoint. And those tips are key. You can go and speak to consultants like all of us who go out there and can live this stuff day in, day out, but actually hearing that from people who do it day in, day out makes a massive difference. So get out there, share what you're doing, and spread the love. Caring is sharing. Thank you very much, Al. I really don't like this switching focus between the two. We're going to have to resort that out next time. Next up, when you're all ready, is Al. What is your lovely suggestions for our lovely listeners and the horrible ones as well for 2021?
So I've got two. One is Pomodoros. Get into the habit of using Pomodoros. If you're not familiar with it, it's setting a timer, focusing for a period of time, having a controlled break, and then moving on. It'll get you focusing. It'll get you productive. But the other one is, we talk a lot about work. We talk a lot about, having a focus and being productive at work. Remember that actually, we got into what we're doing now, hopefully because we enjoy it. And so make sure that you carry on enjoying it. Whether it's putting code days in to do something that, for me, certainly I've found it recently in times of stress that actually just dabbling with some SQL or some Power BI or whatever, PowerShell, it's actually quite satisfying. And that's what I started off doing. So, really carry on experimenting, carry on learning. You can blog, you can speak, you can share that information. But so long as you've got that fun part, the enjoyment, that's really important. You need to have that enjoyment. And if you don't have it, make sure you make the time for it. But then also make sure that you actually get outside, make sure that you enjoy the weather, enjoy the landscape, go off and learn something completely non-work related. Make sure that you're getting away from the screens, because I think we're all spending far too much time at screens. We don't get to wander around the office. We don't get to socialize. So make sure you go off and do something other than work.
Absolutely. Al, you know that thing I said I was going to get done by the end of the year? Unfortunately, tomorrow I'm going to disappear off outside. So.
Yeah, but you've set my expectations now. So yeah.
That's not fun for you. So that's not fair. So be fun for yourself and other people as well.
Absolutely.
Next up, Ms. Laura GB. What's your suggestion for our lovely listeners?
Don't go this late in this round. Which is a challenge. So there's already been suggestions about making sure that actually you get out and do some things. But my really simple suggestion, and I've tried for the past couple of weeks to do it, but I am definitely going to do it in 2021, is to put in those half-hour meetings become 25 minutes, hour meetings become 50 minutes. Make sure that actually you take those breaks because you need them. And there is also, we have missed going out and to the restaurants, going out to the things. And so actually, please, 2021, go and support your local small companies that don't have the big organization behind them. Okay, go and find them because they will appreciate you turning up and actually stepping out of your house. Don't get into that car. Actually go and walk and find your local businesses if you don't live in the middle of nowhere. So that's the other thing is, but coming back onto a techie side is set yourself some goals. Okay, my goal for this year was to get 1,000 subscribers on my YouTube. I got there. Find yourself a goal and work a way of doing it. And then tell some people about your goals, because then that actually gives you some commitment. But I'm not telling this lot.
Fantastic.
Oh, we'll get it out of you somehow.
I feel the next London Power platform, there might be some naming and shaming at that point.
Yeah.
Right. Last but by no means least, no pressure, Gary. Everyone's stolen all the good ideas. What is your suggestion for our lovely listeners for 2021?
Well, I'm going to start with two suggestions. Of one, when you plan your next meeting, please look at the scheduler to see whether you're putting that over time that's already been taken. And the next one is, if you see people on Do Not Disturb, don't disturb them. It's very easy to not look at the little dot that's telling you yes or no, like green for yes and red for no. Just consider it, and before you send that message, that would be two great suggestions. I think everyone would feel much happier in their working life. My third suggestion has to be something to do with development. That would be learn how to use GitHub. Definitely. GitHub is a platform like no other for your career. It will do magical things. You will get to work with people who you never thought that you would work with. The best people in your industry, just a few keystrokes away. Get involved in the community projects, get involved in the issues list, use it as a learning experience. Like, Laura mentioned about a goal for getting YouTube subscribers. My goal was to contribute to open source projects, and I did that. I then became a maintainer, and that's just carried on, and it's a great community to be involved in. It's a lot easier than you think it is. Just go through, learn, reach out to people who no doubt want to help you. But yeah, that's my recommendation or suggestion.
Great points there. Anything from that you've all heard that you want to add on top of that? And I should say at this point, there's 3 of you tied for the first place. I'm gonna have to take scores off this, because I start, then they go, no, I can't jump there on there. So you're going to get points during this round, just so we've only got 2 in front.
So I think all of the suggestions that we've had have been really good, and I think a lot of it is about enjoyment. It's about the mental health, isn't it? It's about actually just making sure that the drudgery of work isn't the only thing that we actually wake up for in the morning. Finding the enjoyment is really important, even more so now that we're all at home and limited. I really liked the go out to restaurants and support your local businesses. I think that's something that a lot of us probably haven't done enough. Certainly, I know our
justification.
takeaways are really doing well because we're getting takeaways all the time. It's great.
Yeah,
It's been my justification for having an Indian takeaway most Friday nights. Is it supports my local restaurant. That's my excuse. Of course, it has no calories.
If it's a takeaway, it has no calories. That's just the way it works.
Cool, definitely. I'll go with that, Al.
My suggestion is for people to listen to the scientific advice out there around COVID. That's probably my biggest suggestion. As controversial as it might be, I think we all have to realize that this is a crazy time and we all have to get through it together. So, let's not, do strange things and not wear masks and just realize that there's sacrifices that have to be made over the next few months and, just kind of try to get through it together. I mean, I know that sounds kind of bad and might be political, but just, masks work. Please wear them.
Good.
Be sensible
cover
so
your
that
nose as well.
be sensible so that we can all get back together again and actually, go to in-person events, which I know all of us are missing, who are used to actually speaking and also just socializing and sharing ideas.
Oh yes,
exactly.
And together is the important part. Is actually do something. So send a message to somebody you haven't heard from for a while. Send a message so that we are in this together. Although we're all separate, we are in it together. So therefore, show support.
Absolutely.
That solves the problem, Kevin.
I want to wrap it on for hours because I'm loving this conversation. But unfortunately, some of us need food, some of us need to go to bed, and some of us have got a day of work to do. So we're going to rock it on.
What have you been doing all day to have not got your day of work done yet?
No, I meant Gary.
Gary's going to get back to work.
Moving on.
I'm going to rock it on and pick our two finalists. And it was really close, really, really close. Apart from me, who was way out at the bottom. I blame Al. But the two finalists are going to be Al and Michael. So let's pick a topic, and I think we'll have Al go first. And which one should we go for? Go for the one you think. I'm going to go for. I'm instead going to go for community doesn't matter. I just need to get paid. So for those who haven't heard this, Al is going to get 30 seconds to justify this and convince us that this is true, that we don't care about community. We should just care about getting the bottom line. Are you ready, Al?
Yep.
Go for it.
So I don't know what all this community stuff is. I sit in my room. I have nobody around me. All I need to do is to actually do my work, get paid, switch off at the end of the day. If I need to ask a question, there's Google. I can find an answer. Microsoft have great documentation. They have everything I need. They have all the real world experience written down in their documentation. So I never need to actually check anywhere else ever. So why do I need community when everything is actually written down by Microsoft?
Thank you, Al. Superb. I don't know what to say after that, apart from to say, Michael, are you ready for the next topic? You get a different topic. And I think I am going to go here. There we go. Your topic is Microsoft should give up and move everyone to Slackforce. Are you ready?
I am. I totally agree. I totally agree with this. And I think anyone who uses the Microsoft Teams desktop client and has ever used Slack will probably agree with me as well. So moving everyone to Slackforce, the app is going to be fast. It's not going to take up 7.4 gigabytes of RAM to run a meeting. And in addition to that, you're going to be able to change between accounts fairly easily. I would also say that Slackforce, I guess this is what we're calling it now, Slackforce, lots of great capabilities in the collaboration space and very secure as well.
You see, what is worrying me most about that one is I truly believed you on this. So I'm sorry to say, Al, there can be only one winner. I think our winner today has to be Michael. So congratulations.
Thank you. No, it's funny. I mean, we joke about this. However, I do use both tools, and
that's a lot of RAM you must have.
It's a lot of RAM, and I have to say, one of the things I was disappointed, totally off topic, one of the things I was disappointed about the Ignite announcements was I thought they were going to say something about redoing of the Teams app, because it's not an uncommon opinion that maybe it could be a little bit faster and a little bit better. So maybe early next year, that's something that's going to come up there.
They've made enough money from everybody using Teams that they can actually just give us all an extra 8 gig of RAM for all of our devices. Rather than a shareholder dividend, they can give us a memory dividend, for all Teams users.
I mean, it could be part of their business.
From Ignite. We did have that prediction from Ignite that actually they move everyone to virtual desktops and they start selling thin clients. That hasn't happened at all, but we'll hold that off for next year.
That's what I was going to say. Maybe that's the big business plan. Just the next thing is SharePoint Spaces Purview remote 365, and we just log into some sort of browser, and then magically the Teams client works, and it's
maybe we just use Apple phones for it. Because they've got the best hardware. We'll just use an Apple phone for it because there's no Windows phone, and everything will just work.
Move it away. Perfect. Well, thank you very much. I think it's, before we go absolutely bonkers, I think it's probably time to wrap up there. I'd like to say a huge thank you to Laura and Michael for coming to join us, for using some of their day or using a load of their evening as well. So thank you very much. That is the end of Grey Hat Beard for 2020. Before anyone panics, we will be back, I think, for 2021. But it's been a true pleasure this year. We'll be back in 2021 for episode 25. We've got our quarter century, but it's been great fun doing this. I think it's a little bit of joy every couple of weeks for Gary, Al and I. So thank you everyone who's listened. Please spread the word, give us reviews. We don't shout about that anywhere near as much as we probably should, because we just love our listeners who are there. So please do give us a review, give us a subscription, do all that stuff that we mentioned enough.
Stop the begging now.
Yeah, exactly. Michael, Laura, is there anything you wanted to say before we wrap up? No, you're all looking good. So I think we will finish up there. Thank you very, very much. I've been Gray.
I've been Hat.
I've been Beard.
Thank you very much, and see you in 2021 where everything will be better.
Happy holidays. Merry Christmas.
Ho, ho, ho.
Thanks for listening to Grey Hat Beard Podcast. The song Drink Up My Mateys was brought to you by Black Bones under a non-commercial attribution license.